Hello and welcome to this review. This review is going to be on a game that I wanted to talk about for a very long time. In fact, I actually made a Let's Play of this game a long time ago but never got around to uploading it. Anyway, that game is Enter the Matrix. I will be reviewing this for the PC, but it was released on like PS2 and the Xbox, I believe. Maybe GameCube too. Anyway, this franchise, it really needs no introduction, right? I mean, The Matrix is the most successful sci-fi action movie of the 90s. The prequels were kind of shit, but they did have their good moments. And it was pretty much Neo with his abilities that he gains throughout the movies that really captivated a lot of fans. So, who better than to play as Neo for your very first officially licensed Matrix game, right? Well, Ghost and Niobe, of course. Duh.
Yeah, these people that were hardly in the actual movies. Do you think they want to capitalize of playing as Neo for their first game? But no, you'd have to wait until a second game for that. Now for this, it seems like they wanted to expand on the Matrix story by showing you what Niobe and Ghost were doing specifically while the movies were focusing on Neo and Morpheus, etc. Even though at the time I was a little bit disappointed that you didn't get to play as Neo, I was also really interested in this side story, especially when I learned that the Wachowski brothers, at the time, actually filmed a bunch of scenes specifically for this game. Which made me think, perhaps there really is something to this game, as opposed to just a really cheap cash-in that us gamers are just so really goddamn jaded to. Well, so what was this game like? Well, for one thing, the graphics are actually quite good for the time. I remember that the PC I had in 2003 really wasn't good enough to run it back then. The PC my parents got was the only PC I had for years, and they didn't want to spend even more money to upgrade it, and fair enough. Now in the end, I somehow managed to get this game running just fine. Although the main problem was that the cutscenes would dip quite a lot in frame rate, which suited me just fine as the gameplay segments were still very playable. Like I said, for the time, the graphics were pretty good, even if the car tires were more square shaped than round. I mean, hey, it was the early 2000s, the graphics were still good for the time. Everything overall looked pretty good, especially the character models. Even the level designs looked good. Now, were the level designs themselves very good? Well, I guess it's up to you. But I thought that the level designs, while looking good, were pretty average as far as exploration and captivation goes. The sound design was good. Pretty much everything sounds like it was taken straight from the Matrix movies. From guns firing to punches being thrown, and it all sounds very good. It replicated all those sounds quite well. The animation was very smooth for the time. The fighting looked on point, and the moves looked quite solid, and everything from the fighting stances to the attacks and throws looked like it belonged in the Matrix universe. The controls for moving and fighting are very simple, which is good. Nothing is overcomplicated, and you don't have to overthink anything while fighting. You just walk up to enemies and fight them. Even if someone is behind you, simply pushing the block/reverse button, your character will reverse their attack. It doesn't matter if you're locked onto somebody else. You will reverse a punch that's coming towards you, which is nice. Overall, it makes you feel like a badass, like you really would if you were part of the team, jacked into the Matrix. The combat animations look quite accurate as well, and your character will automatically adopt a fighting stance when engaging in combat. They will automatically lock onto an enemy as well. And all in all makes it much more simple to play. The hand-to-hand combat is quite satisfying. You can grab and throw people or just punch and kick the hell out of them. Now grabbing and throwing an enemy is very useful, especially when you throw them off a side of a building or just somewhere really high. That is always really fun to do. No matter what game that is always just so satisfying, throwing people off high places. Now there is one feature that does mix up the combat quite a bit, at least for me. And I'm sure you know what that is. It is called focus mode. On the PC you hold down shift and everything slows down. Very similar to what they do in the Matrix movies, and it's pretty cool. All your attacks become stronger, and you can do much more powerful throws too. Now Niobe and Ghost, they play in a very similar way in terms of combat, which makes sense considering they were both trained pretty much the same way. Although there are some differences in their combat. Ghost is more disciplined and precise with his moves, and Niobe is much more straightforward and aggressive with her moves. Seriously, kicking somebody into the air and punching them across the room is awesome. You can also do insta-kills by sneaking up on enemies too. That being said, there are a ton of the same enemies over and over again on almost every level. so the combat does get repetitive after a while. The reversal system is good, and it does help you feel like you know Jiu-Jitsu. Well, as far as the Matrix goes. Jiu-Jitsu doesn't really look like that if you know anything about it. Although there's one thing I really did not like about the combat system, and that is the firearm weapons. Yeah. You can hold on to one pistol, two pistols, one in each hand, or use a shotgun or a few automatic rifles, or even a sniper rifle, which is pretty cool. You can't throw grenades. Throwing in this game I found to be quite difficult and really just complete shit. Don't even bother. Throwing a grenade or flashbang, it's pretty sporadic and you can't really control it. There's not much control to it, I found, unless you're in first person mode, so I hardly ever bothered with throwing a grenade. But still, the variety of weapons is not really the problem. The problem is that firing a lot of the guns is actually pretty useless. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. Usually the firing is sporadic and the bullets don't really go where you want them to go. Bullets go flying in every other direction that isn't straight ahead of you. It's weird. The only way I could figure out how to fire weapons properly was to use them in first person mode or use focus mode. Focus is the only way that I could figure out how to shoot properly. Unless you're point blank in front of the enemy, don't bother trying to shoot them without focus or being in first person mode. Now, one thing that really bugged me about the shooting, if you're in a hurry to pull out your gun, you have to wait for the entire animation of your character pulling out their weapon before you can fire your gun. If you pull out a gun and then try to shoot without waiting for the animation to happen, then what you end up doing is punching the air while holding a gun in your hand. It's weird. Even if it's like a big ass rifle, you just look and feel so stupid while doing this. Well, why does this happen? Because the punch and shoot button are the same button. So while this fuck up happens, you instinctively switch to focus mode just so you take less damage while pulling out your gun. It's so freaking annoying. Speaking of focus mode again, I find it pretty awesome yet strangely inconsistent as to how Ghost and Niobe seem to make time seem so slow that they can see bullets flying through the air and can even dodge them. Yes, you have this ability in the game, which does not make any sense. At least for me, because when I watch the movies, the impression I get is that only the agents and eventually Neo could actually dodge bullets. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still really cool that they have this feature in the game, and I personally would not remove it. But in the movies, Ghost and Niobe were not this good. Ghost is about as good as Trinity, apparently, and Niobe is about as good as Morpheus, maybe? Maybe not quite as good, I don't know. I don't think Niobe is any better than Morpheus, and Morpheus gets his ass handed to him by an agent. Still, I guess they wanted to sell as many copies as possible, and dodging bullets is a huge selling point of the Matrix, especially for kids, like I said before. Whatever. This brings me to my next point. Focus mode. While you can only do it for a limited amount of time, and you have to wait for it to recharge, it kinda does make you seem a bit too powerful at times. Thanks to focus mode, there is no enemy that really posed a threat. Even the bosses really weren't that much of a challenge. Now, if you choose a higher difficulty, the focus mode is impaired more, so there's that at least. And there are agents as well, who do pose much more of a threat. Kinda. You see, it's very hard to actually impose your martial arts moves on these agents. Unless you use focus mode, then they're not really that much of a threat. Unless you're on a motorway or vehicle or some kind. Oh, the driving stages, I will get to that later. My god. Oh, and there are some vampires too. Yeah. Remember vampires in the movie? Seriously, the Matrix movies actually had vampires in it. Yep. If you did not notice that, I do not blame you. They were very brief, barely mentioned, and literally didn't do shit. Or at least they didn't do anything that I remember. Fuck it. So yeah, focus mode is basically just like a temporary god mode in a sense. Now this may not sit well with a lot of gamers, since many gamers don't like things that are too easy. Then again, you don't really have to use focus mode unless you need to leap really far or something or whatever. For me personally, while I do like a challenge, I do enjoy feeling like a god, so I didn't mind this. Yeah, some of you guys give me shit for playing games that are way too easy. That's fine. At least Brutal Doom understands me. Okay, and into the Matrix, here is an arrow showing you the way, but the levels are not very confusing. You won't get lost. In fact, the level designs are quite linear and straightforward. The arrow really only helps you out when you're in a tight pinch and need to make a really quick decision as to where exactly you need to go, especially in times where an agent or multiple agents are chasing you. Now in that sense, the arrow is the closest thing to having an operator talk to you while you're running. So even though this arrow is not really essential, I'm glad it's there. It saves me some time, and it's probably stopped me from dying a few times too. Now I should talk about the story, but I really need to talk about the absolute worst aspect of this game. The driving. Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. These driving stages, all of them, are horrible. Like, they are terrible. They are some of the worst driving experiences I have ever played in a video game. It doesn't matter whether you are Niobe or Ghost, the experience is just the same. It is just pure, utter shit. If you are Niobe, you get to drive most of the time, which is fine. But when you are Ghost, you're riding shotgun, and the CPU drives as Niobe, and it is a goddamn nightmare. The CPU, when it's driving, it cannot drive for shite. It keeps crashing for some reason, and just, it is horribly, horribly programmed. Yeah, even when you're Niobe and you gotta rely on Ghost to keep away the other cars. Ghost does a horrible job at keeping them away, and for some reason it uses your focus mode just to have Ghost get out of the car and shoot other cars, which makes no sense, but whatever. These stages sucked. I have no words for this. Trust me, if you haven't played it, trust me, they just really, really, really suck. It's like the CPU is always going real slow and just straight up banging into everything. If you're Niobe and you're driving and you need Ghost to hold off the enemies, it uses up your focus. But does time slow down then? No, it doesn't, for some reason. Why does it use up your focus meter as well? This is Ghost, he's the one getting out and shooting other cars, so why does it use up your focus meter? That makes no sense either. I guess they didn't want things to be too easy, but these driving stages are just complete and utter shit. Not to mention how boring they are. These stages are just a pain in the ass. And while it does tie into the story, kind of, at least while you're on the freeway, it really would be a better game overall if they just scrapped the driving segments. Even if it meant this game would be more linear and less diverse, it would be much better off without these shitty driving stages. Okay, now for the story. And well, to be honest, the story really is not as important as I thought it would be. Especially considering how much effort they put into actually filming the cutscenes with the actual characters, specifically for this game. I mean, sure, the story of the game does tie into the main storyline of The Matrix, but it doesn't seem to be very significant or even canon in any way. Now, for the most part, the storylines and levels for Niobe and Ghost are pretty much the same, with the differences being very minor and insignificant to the overall story. It's a decent action game, but overall, that's all it really is, a decent action game. It has great graphics, good sound design, and good gameplay, and very much does feel like a proper Matrix experience. It's repetitive as hell, and when it does try to freshen things up with the new enemies and different kind of levels, it just kind of feels so forced sometimes in what it's trying to do, that it feels a tad jarring at times. In fact, for me, one of the most interesting things I found about this game was the cheat system. I'm not kidding. The way this is done is actually really damn good. If you know what you're doing, that is. Basically, if you know anything about how MS-DOS works, then you can tap into other hard drives and different ships and enter codes for the game. And even talk to the other characters like Trinity, who will ask you yes or no questions. And if your hacking skills are good enough, you can even receive a message from Morpheus, etc.
You must use every single piece of information at your disposal.
For what it is, it's done well. It's not overly complicated, but it's also not as simplified as I thought it would be as well. And, if you know what you're doing, you can even unlock this badass katana, which makes getting past an agent or anybody else much more badass and easier. Well, that's basically the game in a nutshell. Now, if you do like The Matrix and feeling like a god at times, then you may enjoy this. If you're looking for a challenge and an expanded insight to the Matrix storyline and universe, well, this may be a little bit disappointing to you.
Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering about what I actually thought about Path of Neo as well. And to be honest, there really isn't much I can say about Path of Neo that I haven't already said about Into the Matrix.
Path of Neo overall is a better Matrix game. For one, you actually play as Neo. The Matrix type powers are done much more better, and the combat system is also improved, and the graphics, they actually seem to be downgraded. Even for the time, the graphics with Path of Neo weren't very good. But still, to me, this wasn't a problem since the gameplay and level design and enemies and stories were done much better, so the lack of graphics didn't really bother me, to be honest. Now don't get me wrong, Path of Neo has its problems. For one, the game seems to have a lot of what feels like filler levels. Like for example, you have to navigate your way through this 3-dimensional maze room, which is covered in human-sized fire ants, which can only be defeated by fire. Get it? Because they're fire ants? What the hell is it with games and overgrown fire ants and having to kill them with fire? God damn. Now this particular level I didn't like very much, but it did mix things up, so I'll give it that. Now if you can get past the bad graphics, then Path of Neo is ultimately what I would recommend as opposed to Into the Matrix. In fact, if you have played any of the Arkham games and Shadow of Mordor and games like that, you'll notice that Path of Neo has the same combat system. Pretty much. Even though it's an older game, and the combat is less defined, it still feels like the same combat from those games, which is a pretty cool thing to rediscover after all these years. So overall, these Matrix games do kind of make you feel like God, which is something you either like or don't. Seriously, it's no wonder the Matrix movies had those Jesus symbolisms. Isn't this what gaming is about for a lot of people anyway? To escape from the real world and make you feel like you're in control, when in reality you seldom are. I guess that's why I like them so much. Anyway, that has been another review. Thank you so much. Thank you to my followers for putting up for me for not reviewing wrestling shit. I did get a PlayStation 4 along with 2K17, and I do have 2K16 on Steam, so I will review 2K16 next. And one more thing, I know that these reviews take such a long goddamn time, so I figured that in the meantime I might put up some mini reviews. Now these mini reviews will not be charged for Patreon. It's just something to hold you guys over while I'm working on the main reviews. If you think that's a good idea, let me know in the comments. And I will do it, because there are some games that I do want to talk about, but I don't really want to go seriously in depth about. I think they'll still be interesting to watch too. And it will not affect the time it takes for me to make a proper review. And it will add a little, albeit much more needed spice to the channel, I think. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Thumbs up and share the video if you like it. And I do post a lot on Twitter as to updates about when I'm going to put out a review. So follow and like me on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff if you haven't already. Thanks again, guys. I will see you later. Adios.
It's one of the biggest franchises of the whole 90s with the fuck, and I just completely screwed it up. Okay. Hello and welcome to this review. This review is going to be on a franchise. No, it's not going to be on a franchise. Okay, I need some water. Oh, fuck. Ugh. Okay, this is really heavy actually. Especially when you're holding it out with one arm. Yeah. Jesus Christ. The hell was that? Anyway, hope I look real cool in this. But I didn't really get to upload it for some reason. But now I am, and I'm gonna do that again because that really sucked. Video making, folks. Takes some many takes. Oh, fuck. Okay. Hello and welcome to this review. Hello and Goddamn truck! Oh my god. Hello and okay, my bad. Let's do this. Oh, god damn it. The script is up. That's not professional. My bad. Just minimize that. That's more better. It's been a long time since I've done this and I'm rusty as hell. Okay, let's see. Duh. I hope this came out. Fuck.